Hey, what's up everybody? Flemel here. In this video I'm going to be outlining how I choose to tackle Mythic Plus dungeons in 7.2. Obviously there are a lot of factors that go into being an effective healer. Not everyone's going to have the same level of success following the same playstyle. At the end of the day, you'll be a stronger part of your team by playing to your own skills. This is just what I've found works well for me, and I'm confident that it's a great jumping off point for anyone looking to give Discipline a shot in the more difficult Mythic Plus levels. I run into a lot of people that don't immediately see the benefits of bringing Disc Priest to the high-end Mythic Plus runs. If you take a look at the role we tend to fill in raids, I can understand how some people are going to assume that the skills aren't directly transferable. So in short, they aren't. Not exactly. In raids, we specialize in conserving our mana to focus on large burst amounts of raid healing, mostly through spells like Light's Wrath and Penance. But in 5-mans, we have far fewer atonements, meaning our Light's Wrath won't be able to 100% top people off, and our heals per second aren't going to skyrocket as much with a Penance or two. But that doesn't mean we're suddenly useless healers in smaller group content. Disc Priests offer some great utility like knockbacks, mind control, purges, mass dispel, we have barrier and pain suppression too. Not to mention on top of that, we bring a sizable amount of damage to a group, which can go a long way in countering some of the affixes and beating that increasingly tight timers that you're going to see in like 15 and up. So the stat priorities I recommend in 5-man content for Discs are pretty straightforward. I go with Haste, then Crit, Versatility, finally Mastery. Haste lowers your cast times and your cooldowns. Shadowmen plays a large role in your success for 5s, not only to keep your tank up through heavy damage, but to keep up with spot healing when Atonement just won't cut it. Focus on getting your mens down to a 1.2 second cast, which is about 25% haste. Crit adds to the damage you can put out, and most importantly in 5s, you'll be casting a lot more single target heals, and crits there are going to save lives. I like to float somewhere between 20 and 25% crit. Versatility is the most boring of our secondaries, but it's still got its uses, even if it doesn't change how we play the class that much. It's a flat boost to our damage and healing, plus it lowers the damage we take overall. I tend to think of it like extra Paragon points, and even minor damage reduction can be the difference between surviving something like a Cat Leap in Dark Art Thicket or a group wiping. Our Mastery buffs our Atonement healing as Discipline. It's the lowest priority for 5-man content in my opinion, because a couple extra percent for your Penance heal usually won't make much of a difference when people are getting hit for almost all their health from a single ability. I'd like to stress that this is just for Mythic Plus. In raids, Mastery becomes significantly more important and crit drops a lot, but I'll cover that in a later video. It's also worth noting that healers' stat priorities are definitely more of a suggestion than, say, a DPS's. I would recommend that you use my weights as a starting point when you're gearing out your character, but play around with what works and what doesn't for your group. So Discipline's talent choices are where you get to play around a lot. There are a few of them that are completely useless, but I find myself swapping around the others quite frequently depending on the dungeon or the affixes that are going on that week. So starting with level 15 talents, you more or less have two choices. I tend to run with Castigation, which is a straight buff to your Penance. It's a nice DPS boost, especially if you have the Legendary belt, and it doesn't detract from any of the other spells you need to cast. Schism is generally a stronger DPS choice, especially if you don't have the belt, but it requires you to spend time casting it and follow it up with a solid amount of damage before the debuff runs out. I found that I can't really sacrifice the time that it takes to throw it out, and I can't guarantee that I'll get the most out of it before I have to swap back to like spamming Shadowmen just to keep everybody up. That being said, I've seen some groups that run it for the added damage boost, even on plus 17s and up, but I feel that a large part of that is the group comp and the players that they have, and also whether or not they're using the Legendary belt. The Penitent may have some very limited use in PvP, but it's absolute garbage for PvE. The healing that it puts out is incredibly insignificant, and it's always better to use Shadow Mend when you need the heal and save your Penance for the damage. Penance is and should be a single target damaging ability with the added benefit of putting out Atonement healing. So basically what I'm saying is, screw the Penitent. In the level 30 row, I'm always taking Angelic Feather. Body and Soul looks great at first, but you're going to be using Powered Shield a lot, meaning it usually won't be off cooldown when you need that run speed. I haven't found any real use for Masochism. You won't notice the hot it puts on you, and the 10% damage reduction sounds helpful, but it's not nearly as helpful as the 100% damage reduction you're going to get by having the run speed to get out of that shit in the first place. For the level 45 row, we have some options, like a lot of options. Shining Force is my standard choice. So the knockback is great to help with kiting to drop necrotic, or to get mobs off of people during skittering, and I've used it more than once to reposition mobs out of Sanguine when we don't have a death grip. Psychic Voice has its uses, but I almost never run it because it's far more situational than our other two choices. It can be great for like the impacts in Court of Stars, but it can also be great for spreading mobs out of your group's AoE and into other mobs that you don't want to pull. Dominant Mind is a game changer for a lot of scenarios. I use it mostly for the cats in Darkheart Thicket, so we can avoid the one shot that occurs when they both leap on the same target. And I also use it to minimize damage from the casters in HOV, or sometimes the pelters in Nelslayer. It offers some okay damage, but it's a little annoying that it doesn't seem to give you an assist option like the Hunters have, so you're going to want to keybind or macro a pet attack onto your bars to yell at it to attack a new mob when the current one dies. Keep in mind that it does give MC a cooldown, so you want to be deliberate when you use it, and I definitely give your tank a heads up beforehand about what you're going to MC and when you're going to break it. Level 60, there's basically only one choice for 5-mans, and it's Mindbender. Mindbender adds damage, and I guess a little bit of mana, which honestly won't matter much because you should sneak in water breaks between pulls. With the 60-second cooldown, you can pop it on at least every other trash back. Powered Solace isn't really worth it for the damage it offers, and it's just another button you need to work into your rotation quite frequently just to justify taking it. Shield Discipline is a raid talent. You won't see enough mana return in 5s, and it adds no damage or atonement healing to your group. For the 75 row, we're again given two options. Twist of Fate should be your go-to talent for the challenging content. You'll get decent uptimes from it when the damage ramps up, and it saves lives. Since it's a passive, you can always rely on it to proc when you need it. Power Infusion is fun, and it gives you a huge damage boost for the lower level mythics. But when the damage goes up as soon as you get a third affix, Twist of Fate is going to outshine it in terms of uptime and healing output. You can ignore Contrition for 5 minutes. The extended atonement duration is amazing in raids, that you can easily juggle any atonement you need to throw out in a Keystone run, making it completely useless compared to the better options you have in this row. Level 90 is where you get to really feel out what works best for you, because every choice has its strengths and its weaknesses. First up is Clarity of Will. Discipline's unique because we offer the only true absorb still in the game. Priests used to only take Clarity when they knew that there was a specific ability they needed to counter. Mostly this meant things like the Cat Leaps or the Bear Howls in Darkheart that could essentially one-shot someone in your group. Thankfully it was buffed recently, which lowered its cast time down to 2 seconds. That being said, one of the big draws of bringing a Disc Priest is our damage, and Clarity doesn't really help with that. Divine Star is a popular choice for Mythic Plus, because it helps damage the packs and offers a tiny bit of healing to your group if everybody's stacked. Honestly, if you're going to take it, it'll be for the extra damage, assuming you're worried about pulling extra mobs with Halo. Speaking of Halo, Halo is the go-to choice for this tier. It's an insane amount of damage and a great group heal, especially if you already have Atonement on your group. The Atonement heal does only work off the first mob it hits, but when you couple that with the natural healing of the ability, it's going to help a lot. Most importantly though, the damage it gives you is incredibly helpful to push that niche we fill in a 5-man group. If you do take it though, you have to be extra careful on when you use it. Halo does pull mobs even if they aren't in combat yet, so again, be deliberate in when you use it and try to work out where the safe spots are in each dungeon. Our final tier is a pretty clear choice for Mythic Plus. Just to get it out of the way though, Shadow Covenant's garbage. I'm really not sure what Blizzard is trying to do with this talent, and it has no legitimate uses right now. It won't spread atonement, it puts a healing debuff on whoever it hits, so you'll end up having to heal them with something else anyway. Maybe Blizz will change this around, but so far it might as well not be there. Purge the Wicked gives us a little bit of extra damage, but it's honestly not much higher than Shadow Word Pain. There is a case to be made that Purge can help on lower level Keystones when the group damage isn't very high, and you want to run to go slightly faster, but overall it's not worth taking over Grace. It's not the most exciting choice, but Grace is arguably the most important talent choice of the entire tree. It buffs your non-atonement heals, aka Shadow Mend, on targets with atonement. Shadow Mend is your bread and butter in 5-mans, so a 30% to it is crucial for higher level mythics. Healers don't really have a set rotation like DPS tends to, but there are definitely things in your toolkit that you're going to get more mileage out of in a 5-man versus say a raid setting. The most obvious spell being Shadow Mend. This isn't known for its amazing single target healing, but we have enough to get by in 5-mans. What I tend to do at the start of a pull is toss out a powered shield on the tank just before they run in to get atonement on them and to buffer some of the damage to buy myself some time to spread out my Shadow Word Pains on every mob in the pull. Our damage is really important in 5-mans, and those ticks add up over time. From there, if the tank is the only one that's likely going to take damage for a bit, I'll start doing some damage with my Penance and Smite while I use Shadow Men to keep them at a safe level. Sometimes that means I'll be spamming Shadow Men based on the damage they're taking, and others I'll just use my shield to keep Atonement rolling while I put out as much single target damage as possible. You'll really just have to feel that out. If I think the group is going to take damage, I'll want to keep Atonement on them with either Plea or Power Word Radiance. Having Atonement running is either going to let me passively heal them up over time with my damage, or ensure that the first Shadow Mend I need to throw on them is going to get that buff from Grace, followed by some Atonement healing to keep them stable or cover any damage my men didn't pick up after the first one. The general rule of thumb is to Shadow Mend if someone drops below 75% health. Otherwise, you can just use your Atonement to get them back up. Obviously, you'll have to get a feel for it based on the mobs you're dealing with. If I'm taking Clarity Will, I'll mostly be using it to buffer damage on the group, like for the cats in Darkheart, or Soul Burst on Blackrock Hold if it's tyrannical and I don't trust the DPS to burn his ads down fast enough. Or sometimes on the tank to help out with Dark Strikes in Vault of the Wardens, or Sunder in Nelslayer. As for cooldowns, you aren't going to see the same insane burst heals from Light's Wrath that you would in a raid, but it will do a decent amount of healing and add some solid damage. I usually save it for bosses or scarier mobs that need to die quickly. Most of the time for Paint Sup, I'll coordinate it with my tank's personals or use it as a ghetto bop to help my DPS soak up some damage from abilities. I use Barrier to help cushion large AoE damage on things like the Scorpions in Nelslayer or Lantern of Darkness in Maw, but the real power in it is from our golden trait that increases our Atonement healing while people are inside it. I make sure I have Atonement rolling on the entire group, I'll wait for the ability, and then I'll throw it down next to the mob so melee and the tank can use it. And then I'll pump out as much single target damage as I can through Penance, Smite, and Halo to keep everybody up. Remember, our damage is what sets us apart. In 7.2, our DPS went up a little bit, so take advantage of that shit. With Warforged and Titanforge in Legion, it's a lot harder to build a true best in slot list like we did in the past. A lot of it's going to come down to just how lucky you get with your drops. Look for haste-heavy pieces, preferably with crit on them. Haste verse is fine, and even crit verse if you're comfortable with your haste levels, but try and avoid lots of mastery on your gear. We're looking to pump out the damage in between the mends we need to cast. Trinkets are where we get to play around a lot. You want to tailor your trinkets to the affixes you're facing and the group you're running with. To complement the display style, I like to go for either offensive or at least well-balanced trinkets. Flask of the Solemn Night and Infernal Writ from Court of Stars are both excellent choices. Oakheart's Gnarled Root from Darkheart offers solid damage and some decent utility, and I know it's not from a dungeon, but Unstable Horror Slime from Emerald Nightmare can be really strong. There's nothing wrong with a good old stat stick though, but in my opinion, you'll get more mileage from proc trinkets. It's up to you if that irregularity bothers you though. If you're really struggling with your mana on tyrannical bosses, it can be helpful to keep a fully buffed Dark Moon deck Promises or Amalgam 7th Spine in your bag, but you shouldn't really need them with how often we can drink in Mythic Plus. Legendaries won't be so much up to you as much as they'll be whatever Blizz decides to bless your character with. But if you have a ton to choose from, I'd aim for Sephuz, the wrists, belt, or the neck. It's worth noting that both the bracers and Sephuz got a major buff this patch, making them top contenders for Mythic Plus. I tend to run with Sephuz and the belt if I want damage, or I'll run the wrists if I want to be a little bit more defensive. Again, play around with what you have and see what works best for you. Your UI is incredibly personal. What I use won't necessarily work for you, but there are a few add-ons that I think go a long way in helping you succeed as Dis. Most importantly, you want some raid frames, or I guess in our case party frames. I use Voodoo. It helps me keep an eye on my atonements and is super easy to use to filter buffs and debuffs that are most important to me. A cast bar like Quartz is helpful to calculate your latency, giving you a better idea of when your spells are going to complete and when you can buffer your next cast. I use SP timers to track dot ticks and cooldowns. DBM is your obligatory boss timer, and it has a handy feature of yelling at you when there are things to purge or you're standing in something you shouldn't be. And I use weak auras for everything. It's got a bit of a learning curve attached to it, but you can seriously do anything you want with this add-on. You can track important spells, give you a heads up of dangerous casts from mobs, or track uptimes of things like Paint Sup and Barrier. I'll throw up a sample of some of my macros on screen and link to them down below. I like to use two basic formats for all my spells. I have one for my helpful spells, which can function as a mouse over, focus, personal, or traditional cast without needing to necessarily target things before each key press. I do something very similar for my damaging abilities, but instead of a modifier to cast it on myself, I use that same modifier to cast it on my target's target, so I don't have to drop my current friendly target just to cast a Penance. You can do a lot of this through various add-ons, but I prefer to have them as macros to offer a bit more versatility to my keybinds, instead of relying on something like Voodoo for everything. To wrap it all up, I'll briefly go over how different affixes are going to alter your gameplay. Keep in mind, it's not usually a specific affix that's going to give you trouble, it'll be the other 2 affixes that come with it that week. This is going to be incredibly brief and a bit bare bones for most situations, so keep an eye out for some upcoming vids I'm working on that will be going over each dungeon individually and how to best handle them. For bolster, I'll use my added damage to try and keep mobs at a somewhat even health pool, or help the DPS catch up on an ad that's been neglected. Mistakes do happen, and if things start to get bolstered, be prepared to ramp up your heals if things get too scary. Necrotic sucks a lot, but it's totally doable. Use your feathers and Shining Force to help your tank kite if you've taken those talents. If they aren't kiting and are trying to just outlast the damage, keep in mind that at about 25 stacks, it can be more helpful to your tank to start smiting for that damage reduction instead of healing. And at 34 stacks, they literally become unhealable. The debuff does apply to our bubbles, so you can't outsmart Blizzard by taking Clarity well. For raging, use that extra damage of yours to help bring enraged mobs down quickly, and pre-shield or pop defensive cooldowns like Sup or Barrier when you notice something's about to get out of control. Don't forget about Shining Force and Life Grip to help your tank kite if it's a melee mob. Sanguine is a free affix for healers. If your tank and melee do their job, then you can completely forget about it. You can use Shining Force if a caster just won't get out of a pool, and you don't have a DK for Death Grip. But most of the time, you can just line of sight or outrange it to get it to move. Skittish can be intimidating if it's coupled with Fortified, but it's manageable. Pre-shield your melee in case a mob wants to turn around and try to one-shot them, and use your tools to help keep them off your range until the tank can taunt it back. Just be on your toes and you'll be fine. Teaming doesn't change our style much, just makes our damage even more appealing. Teaming does inspire me to take Dom Mine more often if a particularly dangerous mob is going to multiply from it. But other than that, just help your group burn through the extra mobs. Volcanic is going to be a lot like Sanguine in the sense that it's often a sigh of relief when I see it on the list for the week, but we do have to worry about it slightly more as ranged. Keep an eye on your feet and be a bit more careful when you drop your barrier if you can't afford for someone to stay at range outside of it. Unfortunately, you do have to be a bit more attentive with your group heals because a lot of people are going to tunnel vision and get hit by 1 or 2, which can turn into a death really quickly if it's followed up with other random group damage. Just keep your eyes open and try not to get too frustrated with other people that just won't pay attention. Along with the removal of overflowing in 7.2, they added a few new affixes. We haven't seen them all on live yet, but Blizzard gave us a good idea about how to handle them. For bursting, help focus fire down mobs to minimize the damage your group might take from killing too many at once, and use any absorbs you have available to you if you think it might get out of hand. Unfortunately, our AoE healing comes from dealing damage, so Dis can have a bit more of a rough time with this compared to the other healers. On Fell Explosives, swap to the orb as fast as possible and help burn it down with the DPS. If you see that it's not going to drop in time, get everybody above 50% health and have Atonement rolling on the group to pick people back up after the explosion. Quaking is rather straightforward. Just stay spread out and try not to be as risky with letting people get low in case you're interrupted mid-heal. With Grievous, depending on the damage people take, you might have to cast a few more Shadow Mends on the DPS than you might like. But once they're close to 90%, you can pick them back up the rest of the way with Atonement, much like you would on the first boss of Darkheart Thicket. Alright, so there you go. Take what you like and leave what you don't. But definitely do give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe for my next videos where I go more in depth at how you can take on each dungeon this expansion. Thanks guys.